From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the daily news brief on Telesur English. We begin this new edition right now. The final results from Venezuela's local elections show that the United Socialist Party has won 92% of the country's mayoral positions. President Nicolás Maduro says it was a major defeat for the opposition parties, which have called for a boycott.
They called for abstention and tried to sabotage the elections. But today, we can say, after the mayoral elections have come to a successful conclusion, that the people of Venezuela knew better, and that the elections on December 10th were a total success for this country.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Frederick Gillingham, has the latest update on the country's local elections.
Just to give you a bit of an update from the aftermath of the results from Sunday's mayoral election, it is a massive victory for the ruling socialists. They've claimed about 91% of the mayorships from 23 states across the country. This, of course, has re-empowered its electoral capacity to mobilize its voters and has shed massive light on how the opposition has failed to mobilize its support at this crucial time. The head of the Council of Electoral Experts of Latin America, Nicano Moscoso, gave a press briefing at the beginning of the week on his findings of the results. He described the election, I quote, ran with international standards and national legislation, especially in areas of expression and transparency. So those were the findings from the international delegation earlier this week. The international response has been, well, in terms of the US State Department's response, in true US State Department style, they have slammed the election results, discrediting the millions of Venezuelan voters who came out on Sunday to vote. The incumbent foreign minister of Venezuela, Jorge Arreaza, has responded to that response from the US, saying that he denotes the impotence and desperation of the supremacist government of Donald Trump. That's all we have time for today. Back to you in the studio.
That was Frederick Gillingham from Caracas. Now, trade unions and social movements in Argentina have called protests against the World Trade Organization, which is holding a ministerial conference in Buenos Aires. Ministers from Chile, Mexico, Colombia, among others, are at this meeting, which is discussing plans for more liberalization of global trade, including the elimination of tariff barriers. A group of protesters gathered outside this conference to express their concerns about the WTO agenda. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban has more details from Buenos Aires.
Esta segunda jornada de la cumbre ministerial de la Organización Mundial de
3,500 people and 164 delegations are present at the second day of the World Trade Organization's ministerial meeting. One field of controversy over the United States proposals regarding the emerging countries, which have been debated on several occasions. Meanwhile, several demonstrations took place on the streets of Buenos Aires after the government of Mauricio Macri deported 64 activists from the country, sparking criticism around the control that the state is imposing. The free trade agreement proposed between Mercosur and the European Union is expected to create conflict among those present and also expected to spark more demonstrations during the afternoon to question the free trade measures that could generate a deeper economic crisis and more unemployment. A consequence, demonstrators say, of the neoliberal measures of the governments around Latin America and in particular of those who are part of Mercosur.
That was Edgardo Esteban from Argentina. Now, also in Argentina, the former president Cristina Fernández is being accused of treason for her alleged involvement in the 1994 attack on an Israeli community center. Her supporters have come to her defense, and we have more in this report.
Argentinian opposition continues to dispute the detention and dismissal order against Senator Cristina Fernández and other officials accused of treason. They're asking for the end of the harassment against those who think differently than Mauricio Macri's government.
This is an outrage. It's something hard to understand in a place where there's law and judicial security. They're really trying to impose fear and make us think we're in a sort of probation. If there's no judicial security, there are no rights.
Judge Claudio Bonadio's request to remove Cristina Fernandez from Congress and send her to prison threatens to further complicate the end of the parliamentary year. Even without support, the government's front will try to go ahead against the senator.
It is clear that all the people who are accused of something and judicially sentenced are members of the previous government, and any denouncement against the current one is disregarded. That's not good for Argentinian democracy. It's not good for the rule of law and shows a weakening of the judicial power and the loss of its prestige.
The Justice Bloc of the Senator Chamber have already put forward its rejection to the order. The dismissal as an instrument of distraction seems to be the objective of the government's party Cambiemos, who's looking to shine a light on legal cases against former officials.
Who knows what could happen to whoever opposes President Macri here? That's what's happening. It's a persecution campaign against political leaders who oppose this government.
This is a violation of the state of law. A judge who clearly responds to the orders of this government is a judge who dishonors the word of justice. We are seen in the world as a place where justice responds to political power.
Regardless of the rejection by most senators, the order against Senator Cristina Fernandez will take place next year, and the opposition is not giving up. Complex days are ahead when all eyes will be on the National Congress debates coming up before the end of the year.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Honduras presidential candidate Salvador Nasralla has formally challenged the results of the election held on November 26. The country's opposition has also called for a vote-by-vote recount of more than 18,000 ballot boxes to be carried out by the Independent International Commission. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal has yet to announce the winner of this disputed race, despite official results show a lead for the current president, Juan Orlando Hernández. Meanwhile, thousands continue to protest against the alleged fraud. Our correspondent Heather Gies joins us now from Tegucigalpa. Heather, now, what has been the opposition's demand? Do they want a full recount or do they want a new election?
The opposition has maintained that they want a full recount of the vote. Their position is that they already won this election, so the votes from this election should be recounted as opposed to going to a fresh election. So as you said in your introduction, on Friday, they officially filed an appeal to the Supreme Electoral Tribunal calling for the vote count that was already completed to be completely nullified, which, if accepted, would logically lead to them being able to press for a new recount of the vote, which they say should take place with independent international oversight and should also consider a scrutiny of the voter rolls and signatures. They say that this is an important part of making that vote count transparent. So this is a much larger vote count than the partial recount that the Supreme Electoral Tribunal completed over the weekend of just over 4,700 ballot boxes. So that's just over a quarter of the total number of more than 18,000 ballot boxes that the opposition alliance is calling for. Now, they don't expect the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, which is headed by an active member of the National Party, Juan Orlando Hernández's party, to accept this appeal, but it is part of the kind of legal process that they have to go through in order to officially challenge the results. The Liberal Party, on the other hand, is advocating for fresh elections. The Liberal Party also challenged the election results, but they called for the entire election to be nullified, which, if accepted, would lead to fresh elections being called. But again, they don't expect those appeals to be accepted by the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, which must deal with all of these many complaints over the process. I think they reported that some 150 complaints were received at all levels of the election, presidential, for Congress people, mayors, and other local offices. They have to address, that is, either accept or reject these appeals before they can actually go ahead and announce an official winner. So it's a bit of a waiting game still before we can get official results.
And what has been the mood on the streets? Have you seen any reports on new protests? And what do you believe the action of the police might be?
So the opposition supporters have vowed that they will continue to protest. They've seen that the Supreme Electoral Tribunal is acting in a way that they say favors the incumbent president, President Juan Orlando Hernandez. So they say that their only recourse is to take to the streets. On Sunday, there were massive protests again here in the capital, Tegucigalpa, and also in other parts of the country. Thousands of people in the streets condemning alleged fraud and calling for a transparent vote counting process. On Monday, there were calls for people to participate in a national strike. That did see some response here in the capital. Barricades were set up outside the city and in some neighborhoods. Those were mostly broken up by security forces early in the morning, but in other parts of the country, those continued. We're also getting the sense that repression of these resistance activities is continuing. Like I said, security forces were breaking up those barricades. We're seeing reports going around that in the western part of the country, where Berta Cáceres' movement, COPIN, is located, they were maintaining barricades and their members were repressed. There's reports that Berta Cáceres' daughter, Bertita Zuniga, was detained. At the same time, there's been reports that over the weekend, the radio signal of Radio Progreso, which is an important radio station providing kind of news from on the ground from a progressive perspective, their radio antenna went down, their signal went off the air. So Padre Melo, who's an important Jesuit voice, progressive voice here in Honduras, and also involved in that radio station, he was condemning sabotage of their radio signal and holding the government responsible ultimately for their signal being taken off the air. So with this kind of possible censorship of the media going on, continued reports of repression of protest activities, we're getting the sense that the crackdown on this resistance movement against the allegedly fraudulent election results will continue, but that's not deterring people who have said that they will continue to be in the streets until a fair and transparent election result is released.
Thank you very much, Heather, for your report. We'll be sure to follow any updates. That was Heather Gies from Tegucigalpa. Now, in Mexico, protesters are back outside the Senate as it debates a controversial internal security law, which has been criticized by civil society and human rights organizations. Our correspondent Pablo Perez has more from Mexico City.
So we're here again standing in front of the Senate doors where a protest has been organized. There are some demonstrators rallied up to organize a sit-up in front of these doors and the other two entrances of the legislative building, where the bill of internal security is being discussed right now. It has been discussed for over a week, and both left-wing and right-wing parties are opposing the official party, the party of President Peña Nieto, the Revolutionary Institutional Party, that is trying to pass the bill before the legislative period ends this year. But in this case, right-wing parties are arguing that the law is not specific about, and they are asking for it to be strengthened in some areas. And both human rights organizations and some of the left-wing parties are arguing that the law is endangering human rights and it's giving extraordinary powers to the president in order to control the army, not only for the fight against organized crime, but also for some unconstitutional abilities that it will grant the army, as the possibility of eavesdrop on citizens and even political opponents of the presidency, and dissolve protests, dissolve social protests such as this one, if presidency deems them to be against the safety of the citizens. So this is why this law is being so contested, and it's very important because the army is already on the streets in Mexico. It is on 29 of the 32 states fighting against organized crime, and since 11 years ago, when the war on drugs started with President Felipe Calderon, there's been a really high rise of casualties, civil casualties, because of crossfire and dubious extra-official executions. So this is the news right here. This is what's being discussed on the Senate, and we're going to be updating the information. We go back to you.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico. Now in Chile, the former president Sebastián Piñera and his rival Alejandro Guillier have faced each other in the last debate before the second round of the presidential elections that are set to take place on December 17th. Both candidates discussed their programs on economic, health, and education issues. Alejandro Guillier criticized Piñera's past government and talked about working with the majority of the country in order to build a democratic society.
Talking about governability, I'll be able to work with the majority of my country, because I've got the possibility to obtain agreements on some very specific matters, and I think we'll have the majority we need, something that will be very difficult for my opponent to achieve, especially with all the proposals he makes that are clearly opposed to our vision for society, a vision we share on many aspects with the rest of the center-left in our country.
Also in Chile, around 2,000 members of Chile's Palestinian community marched in front of the U.S. Embassy in Santiago against U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Police used water cannons on the protesters as they marched holding banners and chanting. Trump's controversial decision has triggered days of protest across the world, jeopardizing the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Voters are heading to cast their vote in Alabama for the U.S. Senate election, with all eyes on the results. The spotlight has been placed on Trump-backed Republican Roy Moore, who has been accused of child sex abuse. Multiple women have come forward to accuse the 70-year-old former Alabama judge of making sexual advances, including his own family members. He denies the claims, but the scandal may have boosted the chance for Democratic candidate Doug Jones to win a seat in the Senate. Let's go to our correspondent Jorge Gestoso in Washington to know more about the controversy surrounding the Alabama election. Hello, Jorge. Can you tell us more about this important election and how will it affect the Trump administration?
Well, Carla, what we know as of now is that the voting is taking place with total normality. Results are going to start to come out around 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. the polls are closing. The results are impossible to predict because polls contradict. Some are giving up to 10 points of advantage of Doug Jones against Roy Moore. That's, we're talking about Fox News. Another one gives 9 points ahead Moore. So everything will be depending on the turnout. It's expected that the assistance to the polls is going to be around 20 to 25%, more than previously, but not really high. And that is exactly what is going to definitely decide who's going to be the winner. How it's going to affect eventually Trump's administration is a question also to be answered here if by any chance Moore wins, possibly the Senate could expel Moore based on his questionable past, but we don't know. But it's, in case that it doesn't happen, it's going to benefit to pass what is called the Donald Trump's agenda, for example, tax reform and other issues that are pretty controversial because they have only 2 senators of advantage, the Republicans versus Democrats. But it has become the big issue in the U.S., this election, because the story of the day is sexual abuse and sexual harassment. Today, we're talking about 100 congressmen has already been asking a congressional investigation about the sexual allegations against Trump. There is a congresswoman, we're talking about Kristen Gillibrand, that she's asking the resignation of Donald Trump, and given the fact of the quote-unquote dark past of this ex-judge Roy Moore that has been denounced by 9 women of sexual abuse being minors, this issue is a center stage of the whole election and the whole future of Trump's agenda.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your report. That was Jorge Gestoso from Washington, D.C., our correspondent. Now, also in the U.S., President Donald Trump's decision to formally recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel continues to generate reactions in Palestine and around the world. Our correspondent from Gaza, Noor Harasins, brings us the latest report from Palestine.
It is now the 5th day since U.S. President Donald Trump decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and also decided to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Angry and enraged Palestinians have been going on protests and sit-in protests and rallies since last Wednesday until today to prove to the world and to the U.S. and to Israel that Jerusalem belongs to the Palestinian people, not only according to their beliefs, but also under international laws. Since Wednesday, and according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, the number of Palestinian injuries only in the Gaza Strip is 250, and 4 people were also killed. When we're talking about the number in the whole of the Palestinian territories in Gaza and the West Bank, it is over 1,000 injuries. There is protests planned to be held today, and the escalation continue here in the Gaza Strip.
That was Noor Harassin from Gaza. Now in France, the President Emmanuel Macron is hosting dozens of world leaders along with companies and campaign groups at a summit in France to boost the fight against climate change. Macron has sought to take the lead on the climate change battle since the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement. The summit comes 2 years after the landmark COP21 conference, which was signed by 196 countries, including the US, and is focusing on appeal for private financing for climate goals. Macron criticized the US decision to quit this agreement.
It's extremely aggressive to decide on his own, just to leave, and no way to push the others to renegotiate because one decided to leave the floor. I'm sorry to say that. It doesn't fly. So, sorry, but I think it's a big responsibility in front of the history, and I'm pretty sure that my friend President Trump will change his mind in the coming month or years. I do hope.
In Nepal, the Communist Leftist Alliance is headed for a landslide victory in parliament. This is the first election under its new constitution. The Leftist Alliance won 113 seats in Nepal's national parliament, while the ruling center-left Nepali Congress just took 21. The Election Commission reported this on Tuesday. The new government will likely reinstate KP Oli as prime minister, who has vowed to stay in office for a full 5-year term, something which hasn't been achieved since 1990. Before this alliance, the communist votes had been divided, but now the unified Marxist-Leninist and the Maoist center have joined in a move that people hope will offer government stability and economic development for the country.
Every Nepali citizen felt that the communists of Nepal should unite. They should not be divided, and then develop the nation together. That is why the Left Alliance won.
Now let's take a look at some other headlines from around the world.
Monday, suspected New York City bus terminal bomber has been charged with terror offenses. The 27-year-old Bangladeshi immigrant Akayed Ullah was wounded in the attack at the Post Authority bus terminal in Manhattan, New York. 3 other people suffered minor wounds in the blast during rush hour. Libyan authorities deported 24 Egyptian migrants from Misrata to Egypt on Monday as part of the International Organization for Migration Voluntary Return Scheme. This comes as human rights group Amnesty International alleges that the EU governments are knowingly complicit in the abuse of refugees and migrants in Libya. Meanwhile, in Russia, during a meeting between Libya's foreign minister and his Russian counterpart in Moscow, Russia pledged to help facilitate an agreement between rival camps in Libya and put an end to the political crisis there.
Russia will do everything necessary to fully normalize the situation in Libya, and in regard to the international aspect of re-establishing the rights of the Libyan state.
Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta called for unity as he led the nation in celebrating 54 years of independence. This comes after the chaotic elections last month that his main challenger, Raila Odinga, boycotted.
The future is now. It is about a healthy nation, built on equal opportunity for all, dignity for all, and the pursuit of material prosperity for all. As I have stated before, and I repeat, as President of Kenya, I am willing and commit to engaging all Kenyans and all Kenyan leaders, including my worthy competitors, irrespective of their religious or ethnic affiliation, in fashioning this new paradigm shift.
An explosion at a natural gas plant in Austria has killed 1 person and injured at least 18 others. A fire followed the blast, which, according to police, was caused by a technical fault. The flow of Russian gas has dropped, triggering price hikes in Europe.
And we've come to the end of this daily news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.